All right, we are live with the Church in Context podcast. We're going to give this a few minutes for our faithful viewers to jump on. So if you're watching this on replay, you can skip ahead about 5 minutes to the countdown, and that's when you know that we will be started. Jonah, how are you this week?
Doing okay. Doing tired, but
doing tired. Yep.
Yeah, a little bit sleepy. We had on the bright side, the curse that people who have watched the podcast have heard way too much about is maybe starting to lift. We actually had a junior high retreat, and I got to go to outdoor school with the church the school connected to my church.
Nice.
But that also, because things are actually happening, because the events I plan are actually coming through, kind of at this point, it also means that I don't get to sleep as much. So I'm kind of in a recovery week right now.
That is a very real thing in youth ministry. So for those of you watching, we've talked about youth ministry a lot, having recovery weeks. Yep. There are definitely seasons in youth ministry for sure. Yeah. So now, I mean, you just had this was supposed to be winter retreat, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. It's actually a funny story about that. So yeah, these are going to be our winter retreats originally, when our high school retreat was going to be in February and our junior high was going to be in March. But then they got pushed back, right? So I was trying to consider, what should I put on the shirts for this year? I got everybody's shirts, gave them out last night. And I was like, do I put spring retreat? Do I put winter retreat? And so I thought I would just avoid the problem. And I decided a month ago, put down Sanctuary Inn, the site that we have the retreat at.
Yeah.
So John knows where this goes. Our junior high retreat was not at Sanctuary Inn. There was a situation a week before we left, because of course there was. So yeah, now but I sold it to the kids as these shirts are made to be reminders of the retreat. They're made to draw our minds back to what the season of our 2021 retreat was, and what better reminder of this retreat.
That's right.
Than the fact that it has the wrong name on it. Yeah, I should have seen that one coming. I should have seen the risk, seen the writing on the wall.
I feel like the approach that we had, Jonah and I served together last summer, that for the summer t-shirts, that summer thingamajig, that's just what we called it. I feel like that is appropriate. You can't even give anything a name, like a location or a time. It's just, but what's funny is that you can't even put winter in this case. If you did winter, those shirts would have been irrelevant also. Just the 2021 question mark,
just put down
that would have been good.
Event. Next shirt.
Event.
Not even BSM. I might I don't know. We might change the name to BSM or something like that. That's an old throwback for if you know, you know. Anyways, Johnson, you've had some exciting stuff going on in your life too. Some big things.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm right in the middle of. I'm pursuing my doctorate of ministry, so right in the middle of that. So that's been kind of intense the past couple of weeks. How my program goes, if you ever get to take graduate school classes, we meet for 1 week, and we meet from 9 to 5, and then you have several months, 4 or 5 months, maybe a little less depending on the schedule, to write a massively long paper and do a project and read a dozen books. But there's no more class time. So it's just a funny structure. So last week was that time. So I'm still kind of recovering from that. By Friday, you're just after taking that level of class, and it's the same class the whole week, you're just kind of tired and a little bit over it. So that's, still kind of feeling that. So that was my week last week.
Cool. Yeah, craziness. I like how optimistic you were. If you said if you get to do a doctorate study, which I feel like if I was actually in a doctorate program, I wouldn't be if you have the blessing of. I feel like in the middle of it would feel like that. So
yeah,
totally. I don't know if it always feels like that,
Exactly. Yeah, it's it can be a little intense sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, I believe it. But now you're done with the in-person class. All you have to do is write massive papers and read thousands and thousands of pages. So congrats.
Thanks. Thanks so much. I appreciate that, Jonah.
Yep.
All right, we're at 5 minutes, so I'm going to do our countdown, and we're going to jump into the actual recording of the podcast. Let's see. There we go. Hi, welcome to the Church in Context podcast. I'm John. I'm here with the real host of the show, Jonah. We are here with episode 22. Jonah, how's it going?
It's good. It's good to be back. Life's going pretty well here in Oregon. I think we're in spring. Have you figured that out, John? Or is it spring? Why did it rain today?
Yeah, it's been cold the past couple of days. We had like a couple weeks of like, is it summer?
Yeah.
And then it's gone back to the cold and windy and very wet again. So that's us living in the Pacific Northwest. Both Jonah and I are in the Portland area, if you guys haven't been watching all the episodes. And yeah, we're excited to be back. It's actually, I think this has been our longest hiatus from the podcast. It's been a solid 4 weeks.
Dang.
So we're ready to jump into today's topic, which might be kind of relevant. Just say no, right? We've had to say no for a couple of weeks because of busier times.
That is true.
I want to give a quick shout out to Student Connection, which is happening this fall, and just kind of with how things are opening up, I think it's pretty likely it's going to be in person. So first weekend of November, Friday, Saturday, definitely come out to Portland where we're going to have a really good time. Student Connection has been just an awesome conference since I've been going in, was it 2016? I think was the first year. So this would be year 5 for Student Connection. So excited for that. That's coming up. So be sure to check them out. But first, Jonah, I want to, dig into this topic. Before we do that, we have to do our ritual of just some odd or peculiar news.
As is our custom, the ritual.
Yes, as is our custom. So, Jonah, first off, a piece of odd news that's real to your life is you actually got to have a junior high retreat.
Yeah, that was weird.
It was canceled and then it was uncanceled. So that's fantastic. So Jonah is, he has the curse of the canceled retreats. Mm-hmm. And he is kind of getting to have some. So go ahead, Jonah.
It got canceled it got canceled like a week before we were going to go as well. The fact that we were originally going to go to, we couldn't go to just due to some things on their end. And so, I had like a week to plan a retreat, but plan C worked. So it took a while. It was not plan A or even plan B, but it happened. And my summer retreats as well that we have for our ministry. We now have something on paper. Those got canceled as well. Both of which it's been like a month since we've had the podcast. I had 3 retreats canceled in like 2 weeks. So which is partly why we didn't have episodes. Some other things to navigate, but we had a replacement already for junior high, and our summer retreats for both of our youth programs are now on the table. So maybe the curse is lifted. If you've been following and you've been emotionally invested, things I think are getting better. It's like Oregon weather though, right? Like it was sunnier, but will it stay sunnier?
That's what it feels like.
Should I wait for the rain cloud to come, or should I start celebrating and wear shorts? I don't know.
There will come a day, I think, where you only have to do a plan A and you don't even think about plan B. When that day comes, it's just going to feel so nice that you don't have to have a plan C or whatever.
Yeah, but you know what's funny, John? I think I remember last year you saying, Jonah, just wait till next year when your plans work out on the first time, when you don't have to deal with this chaos. John, it's next year.
I meant 2022. That's clearly what I was referring to.
Yeah. Next school year, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. The year after COVID.
Yeah.
whenever that comes. But kind of in other funny news, maybe not personal. Did you have a story for us that you've seen in the news?
Yeah. So, whenever you do this funny news story sharing time, basically I just look up for like news outlets in Florida. That's you can just go on the front page of every news outlet in Florida, you'll find something. And easily the most Florida of all news article headlines I've read so far says hangry alligator relocated after chasing customers at Wendy's. And what's great is I read that title to John and he said, "Oh, in Florida, right?" And he was right. It's
That's right.
in Florida. Yeah. So, the story, the headline basically explains it all. This happened, May 18th, just a couple of days ago. A sheriff's office had to come in and escort an alligator out of a Wendy's, which I feel like is maybe the most likely fast food restaurant to have an alligator.
I would go with Dairy Queen.
Really?
But yeah, I think Wendy's is legit. Like if there's no DQ in the area. So
yeah.
But yeah, like hangry. Like, is there an alligator that's not hangry? Like, I feel like that's just a standard. A standard. It's like a cat that's grumpy or something. And like like that's just kind of the standard adjective.
Yeah.
So
yeah, just how they are.
Yeah,
Angry,
exactly.
hangry alligators. Yep.
Totally. Well, what's funny is, as we're thinking about it, my funny news is actually from Florida as well.
Of course.
So the Jacksonville Jaguars this past month signed perhaps the greatest quarterback prospect of all time. And we're not talking about, they had like Gardner Minshew, Nick Foles, and big news, big quarterback joined the team and highly anticipated. And Tim Tebow is coming back to the NFL. I'm so excited. He's going to be working with, I'm sure he's going to be helping shape and mold this developmental prospect that they also drafted called Trevor Lawrence, this guy that, I guess he's okay. Kind of felt like a reach in the draft to get him. But they're going to have Tim Tebow. I'm just so excited. I'm just like imagining like a 2 quarterback set with like Minshew and Lawrence. And then it's like snap to Minshew, hands it off to Lawrence, who throws a pass to Tim Tebow and does the Tebow kneel in the end zone. I'm just ready and excited for that. That's going to be a good time. So if you like the Jaguars, which I'm sure somebody does, you'll be really excited to watch that when the NFL kicks off in the fall. So welcome to Florida. Tim Tebow's back.
It's true. Tim Tebow's it is kind of weird that he's a tight end now. So that's the weird kicker to me. Yeah, if Doug Maroney knows what he's doing, he'll keep Tim Tebow away from Trevor Lawrence. I don't think I think of all the quarterbacks I could have that could teach my player how to play quarterback, Tim Tebow's not very high on the list. I get it. This is a Christian podcast. Many of you listening are probably massive Tim Tebow fans. He's your favorite quarterback of all time.
That's right.
And you're happy to see him back in Florida. I don't know, man. I mean, you're a Broncos fan. I don't know if that means you like him more or if you're like, this guy tanked my team. I don't know. Your attitude is on him, but yeah, Tim Tebow. And it's an interesting story. Either way,
his last time with the Broncos, he led him to a playoff win. So I mean, and then they signed this other guy that got Tebow kicked out of town. This guy called Peyton Manning. So that forced Tebow to leave, which questionable decision in the long run, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
Seriously, how many more rings could the Broncos have had if they just kept Tebow? My favorite thing, though, is watching Tim Tebow highlights because, his completion percentage is like the worst in NFL history. So, they cut out all the incompletions and the bad plays, but when he does occasionally make an amazing play, it looks really, really cool, So watch the highlights and you can think he's really, really good and be excited for the Jaguars this season.
Yeah, Jaguars fans have I don't know if Jaguars fans have ever gotten excited about anything ever. They had one season. 2018, back when they were, they had the Saxonville. So who knows? Tim Tebow tight end. That might be the secret sauce. Trevor Lawrence will get all the credit, but we all know who's really pulling the strings in that organization.
We all know who's pulling the strings. That's exactly right. Well, let's move on to our main subject for today, and that is Saying no. Just like the Broncos said no to Tim Tebow several years ago. Saying no is an important thing in life in general, but for those of us pursuing ministry, it's even more important just to say no. And I know this is true for you. For those of you who follow or know what the Enneagram is, Jonah is a 9, which means he is a hardcore people pleaser. So that is classic for saying yes to everything. Is that right, Jonah? Can you affirm that your 9 is showing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I'm not a big Enneagram guy, but every time I meet someone who is, they go, "You're a 9." They just know. It's They can just tell.
There actually probably is like a picture of Jonah in like the Enneagram book. It's like, this guy is a 9. Mm-hmm. You know what's funny too? For those of you who are listening, who know Enneagram, anytime I've met someone with the name Rebecca, they're an 8 every time. Like 100% of the Rebeccas I know are an 8. So that's just, and I think it might be 100% of the Angelas I know are 5. So that's just a really like interesting thing, you know, like maybe your name and that kind of thing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So all to say is, you know, Jonah has a tendency to people please, but so do I. And I think that's just a thing that people struggle with. I think it's really hard to be in a service oriented type role or job and not be inclined to that. In fact, for me, you know, in customer service, you have the motto that's often taught to employees that the customer is always right. I worked for Starbucks for 5 years, and one of their things that they ingrained in us, at least back in 2007 when I first started, was just say yes. Just say yes. So that's one of the things that I have going on in my head, a soundtrack you can call it. Just say yes to the customer, right? So that's fine when someone is asking for like a double soy, upside down, extra hot, 2 ice cubes latte, but when it comes to big asks in your life and things that people request of you, it's hard. And for those of you listening who are students, you might be asked to do a lot for your volunteer roles, maybe in your church or outside of that for your sports teams, even things like for school, you might be asked to do extra things, and you have to balance what that looks like, and then bouncing friends. And it's hard to navigate all of those things. So we're going to talk about the importance of saying no, So we want to get into some of these questions here. So why this topic? So actually it was you, Jonah, who came up with this topic today. Why are we talking about saying no? Isn't that kind of like a negative, like downer thing to be thinking about?
Yeah. So this topic is, like John said, I'm somebody who's pretty prone to say yes. I think it's really easy to when you work or involved in a church, because the work you're doing is important, right? If you say no to something, that could potentially be one less person there to maybe bring someone to Christ, right? Like the stakes are very high, and it seems like they're always high in everything you're asked to do. You're constantly doing work that's good, being asked that, and that combined with my personality has made me say yes to a lot of things. So I'm really blessed to be being mentored by one of the pastors at the church that I go to and work at. And he brought up how at their elders meeting, they were talking about me, and most of it was good stuff. He said, we all agree that you're a grinder, that, you work hard. But he also brought up this criticism. He says, but we also realize that you've never said no to any of us ever. And so, yeah, to me, I'm looking at my, my life and my early time in ministry and realizing that I think I've been treating it a lot like a sprint at times. And
Sure.
In this crazy season of COVID, it feels like I just want to be able to do something as soon as I can. So many things have been taken away from me, as we always joke about. So many opportunities I've had to serve and to be with people. haven't happened. So whenever I get the chance to do something that is good work, I really want to say yes to it every time. And I'm starting to realize that that might not be the healthiest balance to have in life. I think saying no to some things allows you to say yes to others. It gives you the space to, yeah, just be better at what you're supposed to do when you don't say no to, or when you do say no, rather, um, to things that are maybe secondary or things that aren't as important. And I
Yeah,
just think
that's
it's
really
an
good.
important lesson, yeah, that a lot of people, especially in the church, maybe have a harder time with. So that's why I wanted to talk about it, because it's something I need to hear.
Yeah, that's great. As I'm thinking about this, as we're thinking about maybe those who are in ministry, looking to get into ministry, or even just those looking at having a balanced, healthy life too, think of this book by a youth ministry legend. His name is Doug Fields. If you ever get into youth ministry, you want to know this name, Doug Fields. And he wrote a book. I'm going to click on the title here. It's called What Matters Most When No is Better Than Yes. And it's a really short book. And I've read it a couple times because it's just short and easy to digest. But basically, the idea is that saying yes can be really harmful. And what you want to know behind saying yes is behind every yes is a no. So if you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. So, perhaps the yes is really that important. Perhaps all that you were going to do was hang out at home and do some reading or watch TV. And then you said yes to something. So you're saying no to hanging out at home and watching TV. But maybe you want to spend more time with Jesus. So if you say yes, even if it's something really good, or maybe it's, hanging out with friends or even serving in some capacity, but that means you're sacrificing your time with Jesus. You're saying no to that. And as you get older, a lot of you listening will have, different family dynamics as well, whether you're your family that you grew up with, or eventually you get married and you have kids. You're saying no to them if you say yes to something else. Now, there's always balance, because if you say yes 100% of the time to family, and if someone's home, I got to be home, then you're not saying yes to doing a job or doing a career or doing the work you're called to or doing school, whatever that is. But there's always a no that comes with a yes. If you overcommit to a really big work schedule or sports schedule, let's say, you're saying no maybe to rest, or to doing well at school, or to doing well with relationships. So that's just so important. There's always a no that comes with a yes. So you're saying no in some capacity, no matter what. And that's a hard thing. And it has to do with us as people. We're limited in our time and in our energy and in our resources. So this is an important topic. When should you say no?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I discipled a group of guys, and one exercise that I had them do that I probably should do. I'm just realizing I should probably do this. Is I had them write out a list of their commitments in life. Commitments to school, to the role as they were discipleship group leaders, and so their roles in that, their friendships, their relationships. I had them write out a list of things that they were committed to in life, and then I had them try to order it the best that they could. And the idea was, if you had, or I give them, I think I had them do tiers of priority. So you could do like tier one is the things that you would want to say yes to as much as you could. Those were the number one things that you prioritized in life. Tier twos were things that were good, that if you had time, you definitely would try to do. And tier threes were things that were just less important, but maybe something that's part of your schedule. And the idea was that if you could tier them, you could try, when the two came in conflict, you could look and say, this is something I should be prioritizing over this. It's not a foolproof model, but yeah, I think as people, we can be often really busy. And like you said, we can't hold everything in perfect balance. We can't do all that we want to do in a day. And the most helpful part, I think, about that exercise was, one, realizing how many different things that all those guys and that I was involved with in our lives. And two, was also important just to realize that not everything we do is equal. Some things that we do, be it work or spending time with the Lord, or or spending time with family, some of those things just have a higher priority than other things. It's important to realize that and to ask yourself, hey, am I giving too much time to something that's not worth it? And what is it costing me to give that time?
Yeah, that's a really good insight. Just this idea of kind of ranking what's most important and really understanding that that's a tough thing. And that's something that I still struggle with is priorities, right? And that's, understanding what is significant and what proportion. It's like, okay, a lot of students watching might say, well, school is really important. It is. But if you're so dedicated to school that maybe you're studying, 5 to 8 hours after school is over every day, and you're sacrificing your sleep, and you're not spending time with your family, and you're not spending time with friends, and there's like even a balance there that you need to strike where, okay, how much school should I do? And, should I go for that A minus or always get that A plus and just kind of constantly drive towards that? There's I think he's a businessman or maybe motivational speaker named Jim Collins. And he says that the good is the enemy of the great. So it's not the bad is the enemy of the great. It's like, should I participate in the sports team or should I go like rob a convenience store? It's not what it's asking, right? It's, should I participate in the sports team or should I watch these extra movies or hang out with my friends? It's like, yeah, that's hanging out with your friends is something that's good. It's good to have community. It's good to have fun. Sometimes that can be an enemy of something better. And a lot of times when you're called to serve in the church in some way and be the church, as this podcast is called, Church in Context, there are things that can be competing. I mean, there are lots of ministry opportunities and you can be pulled in a whole bunch of different ways. Even as a volunteer, you can be, kind of dipping your hands in a lot of things and you're stretched thin and you can't do anything well if you're doing everything. So that's just something really crucial. What is most important? And it's not always about your time too. This is something I've had to learn recently. It's about your energy usage too. So, sometimes it's like, okay, this thing that I gave my whole weekend to, like a retreat, can be really, really tiring and you used up all your energy. That was a good thing, but you don't want to have something going on Monday that also takes up a lot of energy because you just don't have it left. Your energy is used. Even if you have the time, you need to rest. And the thing about rest is that rest will find you if you don't choose it. And it will find you maybe it'll find you in a hospital bed. Maybe it'll find you in prison. Maybe we'll find you and you'll be dead. I mean, I hate to say that, but you know what I mean? Like in some way, like if you don't give yourself rest and recovery and care for your own soul, you'll have broken relationships. You won't have a deep connection with Jesus. And physically, you might break down. It might not happen when you're 16 or 21, but it could happen later. And you might lose years off of your life because of not giving yourself the space to say no.
Yeah, it's true. And another thing about rest, you can't rush rest either. That's one thing I think I'm learning is I'm like, I'll just spend, if I spend a week at a youth retreat, I'll think, man, I'm just not going to do anything Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to get a ton of sleep on those 2 days, and that'll recover me. But I don't think that's how we work. I'm starting to learn that that's not how the human body or how our minds as well work. I don't think all tiredness is just you being sleepy too. I think that there's an emotional rest that we need too. I love this quote by Augustine. He uses it at the start of Confessions. He says, "Our souls are restless until they find the rest in you." And sometimes when we're moving from thing to thing to thing, saying yes to every opportunity we have, even if it's to further the kingdom, we aren't finding our rest in God. We're not giving ourselves spiritually time to be just with the Father, with Him in His presence, where He can restore us, because we're so busy doing good things. It's tough, but I think that's such an important piece. That resting piece is huge. It's really easy to tell people no when there's a clear time conflict as well. When you don't have time, it's a lot easier to say no, I'm doing something at that same time. It's a lot harder to have that conversation if it's just an energy thing. And there's a lot of societal expectations that go into it. There's a lot of Yeah, I guess just ways that we want to be perceived. No one wants to be perceived as lazy, and saying I
Right.
can't do this and the rest sounds lazy. Um, but yeah, it's important just to have those boundaries, to keep them and to know your limits. Know when you need rest, how you can find it, and how to rest well. I think it's also important. But yeah, all of this stems from saying no. All these good things you're probably hearing about rest, and it's easy to be inspired and like, man, I want that rest. I want that time with God. My soul can not be restless and can find rest in Him. But that sometimes requires saying no. That's like the precursor to rest. Oftentimes, is saying no to something.
That's right. And you know who was a great example of saying no and making space to spend time with the Father is Jesus, right? So we have a couple passages we want to share. It just how Jesus made this a priority. And keep in mind, Jesus's earthly ministry was about 3 years, and he is the Son of God. He is God, right? So, and he took time to rest. And some of us don't rest as much as Jesus did. So I'm going to read a passage here from Mark chapter 1, verses 34 to 38. It reads, "And Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was." So Jesus was doing important work, and more people need to be healed, but he took time. Very early in the morning, this is verse 35, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him. When they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages so I can preach there. That is why I have come." So, how often do we feel that, people are coming and everyone is looking for you? And just being in a leadership role, it feels that way sometimes. Everyone is looking for you. And oh my goodness, today with the fact that we have phones attached to us and people can reach us at any time, and there's even an expectation to have that on. Like a tip that I would give people is there's an awesome feature called airplane mode that also works when you're not on airplanes. And I would highly, yes, I know it's groundbreaking. I would highly recommend you use that feature often. Sometimes it feels comforting when you go out places. You want to have your phone with you just in case there's an emergency, you need to call someone, but put it on airplane mode. Put on airplane mode when you're spending that time being with Jesus, being with your loved ones, when you're doing important work that is the right thing to do at that time. Avoid that distraction because you need to make space to say no in the area too. So just looking at the example of Jesus, how he took time to rest and spend time with the Father, he needed that time and we need it too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I like how you point out that Jesus was also somebody who was very time conscious. I think we see that a lot in the Gospels. I'm always surprised by how often he says, "It's not the time for this." I think of the wedding at the miracle at Cana, as we mentioned, saying, "My time's not now." He knew how much time he had, and he knew he needed to use that time well, and he knew that part of using that time well was to take time away from his earthly ministry to go be with the Father. Jesus was somebody who might seem like he used his life intentionally, and it almost seems like he's in a rush, right? We read in Mark, what you were just reading, and kaiuthis is this phrase in Greek that's used at the start of like every chunk of the section, and it means "and suddenly." And if you read through the book of Mark, you'll see, and suddenly Jesus was here, and suddenly he was here, and suddenly he was here. But even though he did a lot in his life, so much that we talk about his earthly life 2,000 years later, he still had time to rest. He found time. He made time. I just think that's important. And he found time because he said no to other things. So yeah. But Mark's not the only gospel that Jesus says no to things in. He also says no in Luke 12, 13, 15. It says, "Someone in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me.' Jesus replied, 'Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?' Then he said to them, 'Watch out. Be on guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions.'" So here I think we see something a bit interesting. A man in the middle of a crowd that Jesus is speaking to asks Jesus to do something for him. But Jesus knows that's not part of his role. That's not part of his mission. That's not going to further his cause on earth. He's not on earth to divide this guy's inheritance. He's on earth to show people God's character, to ultimately die for the sins of humanity. That's his mission. And he doesn't get involved in things that are distracting him from that. So what does Jesus do? And verse 15, it says, then he said to him, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. See, Jesus knows that his role is to be a teacher, to impart God's truth. And so he gives them a lesson. He doesn't sit down and divide the inheritance. He doesn't use his godly wisdom to show who should inherit what. But he knows what his role is in these people's lives, to be their savior, to show them God's character, to preach the message of the kingdom. And his job wasn't to divide these guys' inheritance. So he doesn't use time for that. He sticks back to his earthly role, his mission on earth, and does something that furthers that instead.
And how good is that example to us? I feel like, maybe this isn't everyone listening, but I can try to get myself involved with and give input to, or maybe control a lot of different things, and a lot of things that just aren't my responsibility. Now, it's important to help others when they need help and jump in that way. But a lot of times we try to control things that aren't ours to control. We have an opinion about something and we try to influence others, and maybe we're frustrated if they don't listen to us, or we just do things that we're not particularly good at. I remember one time, this is back in the day, when I asked Jonah, who was my intern at the time.
I know the story already,
yeah,
John.
I know, the story. And
I just said no.
I should have had Jonah do other things. I was kind of new to leadership and new to having an intern and having, an employee or something like that. And a project I was working on was repainting my office because it was part of the church nursery. And I asked Jonah to scrape wallpaper. And, I wasn't really good at scraping wallpaper. I didn't really want to do that. But Jonah's really not good at scraping wallpaper. And there's a lot of other things he could have done with his time, connecting with junior hires that he was, hired to be over. And he took like an hour to scrape like 1 square foot of wallpaper or something like that.
not my gifting.
That's right. Not your gifting. And it's important to know that. It's important to know, just who you are as a leader, how you're gifted, and to really try to serve. And, when you work in a place that you're gifted in, it's important to realize that there are going to be times and places you're asked to do things that are outside of that. And that's okay. Like, don't always say no to everything. Oh, sorry. Doing errands is not my thing. Stacking chairs, not my thing. Picking up trash, nope. Sorry. I have bigger things to accomplish. I'm not saying to have that attitude and say no to literally everything that doesn't fall under your skill set. But maybe you're asked, hey, can you run the church nursery? And you're like, well, I'm already serving on the worship team and I don't really like babies. So maybe that's a good time to say no. You know what I mean? Really assess your gifting and what God has called you to, how your experiences have led you to certain things, what your training is in, and lead with that. And don't feel like you have to say yes to everything. Because sometimes if you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Kind of like we talked about. You might be saying no to the worship team because the nursery is such a big job, an important job in the church. So I love that example from Jesus's ministry, how he's not here to be a judge or an arbiter or to deal with people's stuff. In fact, he often says in the Gospels, leave your stuff behind. He's not here to say that. He's not here to divide it. Maybe he's the best person to do it, but he has more important things to do. And his message and his mission was much greater than that. And that would have limited his time and his energy. So the last question we're talking about today is it selfish to say no? And the answer could be both, right? Both yes and no, depending on your motivation, right? But a lot of times the answer is it's not selfish to say no. In fact, it might be selfish to say yes.
Mm.
If you're saying yes for maybe your own reputation, for your own pride, because you want to maintain control, that's me right there. When I'm, they're asking me, I can't pass this up. I want to take care of this guy's inheritance because I'm a big deal and I want to make sure that happens. I totally would have said yes if I was in Jesus's position. And letting go of that control, letting go of that pride, it's important. So it could be selfish to say yes. Your heart, your motivation, the why behind what you do, asking that question is so significant.
Yeah, I like what you touched on there about how, yeah, it kind of depends. And I think all of this is important to hold it with wisdom and to hold it in the balance. As people that, someone that constantly has to ask people to be youth volunteers, I'm not saying say no to everything, right? I hear no a lot, but I am saying it's important to have that balance and to have wisdom in that. Yeah, I certainly don't think it's always selfish to say no. I think especially if it's things in ministry,
Yeah.
it can cause some real damage if you say yes to something that you shouldn't. It can be a real strain on, for example, like your marriage. If you go into, if you give up hours and hours and hours a week volunteering in a ministry, but your partner isn't into that,
Yep.
then that's going to cause a big rift. Might be selfish, maybe something you want to do, but that hurts them. Saying yes sometimes doesn't just hurt you, but it can also hurt other people. Maybe in the moment,
huge.
maybe in the long run. So sometimes having to listen to say no, to prioritize things like your family, to prioritize things like your relationships with other people.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, sometimes saying yes is a selfish thing to do. Like you said, if it is coming from a sense of pride, if it's coming from a place of needing to be needed, that's one that I resonate a lot more with. I love being needed by people. And so when I say yes,
that's huge.
When I say yes, it's a reminder to me that I'm important, that I matter, that they need me to help them out. Right. So sometimes I say yes for that reason, and that's selfish. And so just remember when you're saying yes, it doesn't just affect you; it affects those around you.
That's right. Yep.
And would they want you to say yes? So as you are asked different questions, as you're asked to serve or to work or to do X, Y, or Z, always ask yourself, is this yes coming from a place of selflessness where I'm being self-sacrificial with my time, my energy, or is it selfish? I think at times there's a balance. There's not a one-size-fit-all answer to this question. But I do think that there's definitely selfless times to say no, and there's selfish times to say yes.
I think that's huge. And sometimes we can say yes as well to avoid conflict or to avoid hurting someone's feelings or to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. And I can fall into this trap too, saying yes and then not following through. And that's worse when you don't follow through on something you said yes to, and that is something that is spoken to in scripture. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. It's better to say no and then be like, oh, okay, I can actually do that. And then you follow through and do it, and to say yes and to not follow through just because you're scared of saying no. And that's a real thing. There's a lot of pressure. Hey, I came with one more question just to kind of wrap things up. What are some tips to saying no? I mean, besides actually using the word. Hopefully that's obvious. What are some tips? What do you have?
I think for me, one is setting an expectation with other people that you might say no is a big one. If the expectation with people is that you'll always say yes, a no can mean a lot more. So if you set that precedent early and often, I think that's important. I also think saying no early is big. You talked about that just a little bit ago about how sometimes let your yes be yes and your no be no means that we don't double back on what we've said. So I think if you say no to things earlier, it's easier than doing it last minute. I recently I really had a situation where I had to cancel something for our youth ministry, partly due to other factors outside of me. But I wish I would have said no earlier instead of having to wait for other things to fall into place. So I think saying no early and saying no, often is important as well. Setting that reputation that maybe you'll say no to people, and it's not that you don't like them. Yeah, I think those are both two tips that I need to live out more. I'm not saying this is somebody that's doing this well, okay? But yeah, I think that's a helpful place to start.
Yeah, that's good. So, once you get into that expectation or the expectation that others have on you that you're going to say yes, then it gets harder and harder and harder to say no. So it's important to have boundaries in the beginning of a job or relationship or team or whatever that is. I think good communication is really essential for that. Be sure you're understanding what you're saying yes to. I've seen a lot of bad communication, and that goes on the person asking as well. But yeah, be careful about that. Something that I think is important too is saying yes to things that are important and putting those on your calendar. Saying yes to rest. Saying yes to devotion time, extended time with Jesus. Saying yes to your family, and actually, like, let's say, all right, I'm going to hang out with my siblings. Be like, I'm going to put that on the calendar. That is 5 to 8 p.m. on Thursday nights. I'm going to hang out with my siblings. And then if someone says, hey, can you do this thing on Thursday night? You say, I'm scheduled, or I have a commitment. And you don't need to say what it is. You don't need to say, well, Saturday morning from 9 to 11 a.m. Is my devotional time. Just say, no, I have something on my calendar. It's already on I can't do something Saturday morning. And if you say, well, I'm having my quiet time. Oh, well, you can do this other thing, right? So give yourself blocks of time where you've already said yes to something else, so it's not automatically filled. What I've discovered in having more free time is that time gets filled up. If you're not in charge of your own schedule, then other things will fill it. So be on top of it. Be in charge of your own schedule and make space for that. And just another tip is be consistent with scheduling yourself time off. It is a scriptural practice in the Old and New Testament called Sabbath. And traditionally that's, Friday at sunset till Saturday at sunset. But it doesn't have to be that, depending on what it looks like for you, but schedule some time. Maybe it's hard to do a full 24 hours right now with your commitment, but can you schedule a time that's like, I do this every week, where I am not doing something super busy? Maybe I'm spending time with family. Maybe I'm having devotional time. Maybe that's a time where I spend time with church friends, whatever that is. Ideally something that is actually restorative to you, and take that time. Because it's kind of like if you read the Old Testament, when the people of Israel did not honor the Sabbath found them. That is why it actually says in the text, in scripture, that is why they were exiled into Babylon, is because they did not give the land its Sabbath rest. They did not ever take rest. So rest will find you if you don't be on top of it. And that's just a huge, huge thing. Schedule rest. Say yes before you do the important things, before you say no to everything else. All right, if I can add another tip too, give yourself space to be flexible as well. We're all talking about saying no, but it's good to say yes sometimes. And if you can have space that you're like, I don't know what this is going to be, but I'm going to leave this as a space to say yes. Let's say it's like, I'm going to leave Saturday afternoons free. And if that's a time of rest, great. And if someone wants to hang out and they're like, hey, I want to hang out on Wednesday night, you can say, you know what? I already have something on Wednesday night. I'm going to youth group or whatever that is. I'm hanging out with family, but I have Saturday free. So you have times where you can say yes, or you can fit in a yes, where someone wants to connect with you or do something, and you have a yes space, as opposed to it owning your schedule. I think that's just that's just significant to not be super rigid where you can't ever say yes, because you don't want to
Yeah.
be that person either. You want to be able to say yes and not be so in control of things that you're not flexible. And for those of you who are working and have some flexibility over what you do, I heard a great tip recently. This is for those in ministry, especially, is only schedule 4 hours of your 8-hour day. And that doesn't mean you only work 4 hours, but think about it. Think about how often, especially Jonah in a church office setting, how often do you get interrupted? Have you ever gone and been there for a full day in the church office and you've not been interrupted?
No, I don't think so yet.
It's not a reality. Maybe if
Yeah.
like you're literally the only person in the building on a Saturday, maybe that can happen. Even then, I don't think that's real.
Yeah.
You're going to get interrupted, so leave yourself with space. Don't schedule yourself so crammed. Remember, we're talking about energy. We're talking about just different things that are priorities, and it doesn't mean that every second of every day is scheduled to the max. So be thinking about that. Realize that busy people can also be lazy if they're not prioritizing what's most important too. And think about what are your values and what's most significant to you. So think like Jesus thought as we look at those gospels.
That's the answer to a lot of the questions we might ask on the show. Just do what Jesus did and you're fine. So
I think that's good. Yeah, we'll just end it with that every time, and we'll have shorter podcasts in the future for that.
Easy. Yeah. No, it's true though. I talked to a guy who leads a really big church in Canada. Can't remember his name off the top of my head. He came and spoke at a retreat that we had, and he had a table for us to come and talk about just life in ministry, just to walk us through things he had learned and things like that. And one of the 3 points he brought up out of all the things he could talk about in ministry was the idea that we can accomplish. The way he said it is we overestimate how much we can accomplish in 1 year, and we underestimate how much we can accomplish in 10 years. His idea was that we don't need to constantly be going into the office to get everything we can possibly get done for the week or for the month done in 1 month, right? We might not, we probably can't do as much as we want to in a month, but if we're thinking long term, thinking big picture, we're focusing on those right priorities. It's a lot easier to have an effective ministry. It's a lot easier to be an effective witness in your own life to the gospel. It's a much better way of being an effective volunteer at your church if you're thinking long term. Think what legacy do I want to have in 10 years, as opposed to what needs to be done right now.
That's true. That probably helps you keep in perspective the need for rest as well, because you can't imagine keeping up your current schedule for 10 years. Like, you will end up in a hospital, like I referred to, if you do that. That's a good word. Thanks, Jonah. Hey, let's move on to our last segment of things that are significant. It could be, this segment, as we've described it before, something that's personal in your life, or something bigger scale. And since you led with the first question, I'm going to lead with mine, since I might steal yours. We'll see. But just the fact that things are looking like they're opening up or looking more positively with the coronavirus restrictions, just the fact that, those who are, at least adults that are fully vaccinated, can have a lot more flexibility, and that, there were a lot of assumptions that are being proven true by science that now, if you're fully vaccinated, then it's okay and safe, and you're not going to put others at risk or yourself at risk, by not having a face mask on in certain contexts or whatever, or social distancing. So that's just super encouraging. I mean, that's something very positive to look forward to. And on the flip side, though, for those listening and those who are with us currently, be praying for the country of India and for those countries who don't have access to vaccines, or even things like ventilators and good hospital care, because there's a lot of tragedy still happening because of this pandemic. And we're very blessed in the United States. We have literally an overabundance of vaccines right now, and we're actually trying to give those away to other countries, because we kind of overbooked vaccines out of precaution. But yeah, I'm optimistic for the United States and for a couple other countries in our shoes, but be praying for those who are in need. There's just a lot of hurt going on in the world right now, thinking of Israel and Palestine as well. And that conflict with a lot of Palestinian casualties. A lot to pray for, but a lot to be thankful for too. Sorry, I just took a whole bunch of things. Sorry if I took yours. Go ahead, Jonah.
Well, good. You took my A, B, and C, but you know what, John? I'm a man with backup plans. No, definitely the one that came.
Sorry.
The one that came to my mind for sure, at least here in Oregon, was the recent changes to the mask updates. It feels like we are kind of nearing the end of so seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's nice to be moving a little bit closer to it. I'm just really excited about that. I'm going to have to start shaving again, but it feels like this is a step out of this pandemic we entered into however many months ago now. What is it? 14 months ago. So it feels like this is nearing the end, nearing the final chapters. So that's definitely mine as well.
That's excellent. And, that reminds me as we wrap up the show today that Student Connection is most likely going to be live and in person this November. So excited for you guys, excited to be reconnecting with your churches, hopefully in new ways. Maybe you have been meeting, maybe you get less restrictions now. Maybe your churches and youth groups are going to start meeting in person. All that. Thankful for you guys. Thanks for listening, and check out Student Connection again. And don't say no to Student Connection. That's the final tip for this week. Say yes to Student Connection and make sure you make space. Jonah, thanks again for allowing me onto your show and not saying no to me. And go with God, you guys, and say yes to who Jesus is and what he's calling you to be and spending time with him. All right, have a great week, guys. We'll see you later. And we'll break there. I don't see any viewers that hung on to the end. We're going to have some listeners, hopefully, on the recording.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we'll take it offline.
Cool.
So for those of you who've stuck with us for this extra minute, thanks. And we'll see you next time.